So every year, our tradition invites us into an unfolding of our spiritual journey that we mark month after month, season after season, with the different holidays that we get to celebrate together, that we travel through together. And you might not know this, but this year-long process, this year-long spiritual journey begins tonight. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I actually, for once, mean it literally. Tonight, this Shabbat, tonight, is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Tonight is the first of the month, of the Hebrew month of Nisan. And the Hebrew month of Nisan, biblically, according to the Torah, is the first month of the year. So tonight, though we never do, tonight would be the night to wish one another L'Shana Tova. Happy New Year. We don't because 2,000 years ago, the rabbis decided to change the way we celebrate it because 2,000 years ago, as they were compiling what's called the Mishnah, which is the core of what will eventually become known as the Talmud, the rabbis compiled the Mishnah over 200 years, the first 200 years or so of the Common Era. And that was a time where the Jewish people were sent to exile from the Romans who had come, invaded, and destroyed the Second Temple and dispersed us throughout the Roman Empire. And the rabbis got together. The rabbis was a new thing, by the way. There was no such a thing as rabbis before that moment. They got together and they decided that they needed to evolve Judaism in a way that was no longer connected to the land, since we had lost the land, but that could be portable, that could be taken with us wherever we went. And so they switched the holidays since they were no longer connected to the land. But the biblical time, which was the 1,000 years where the Israelites lived in the land of Israel, and through the two temples that we had, our life and our worship was connected to the cycles of the seasons. Because we were an agrarian society primarily. And so the cycles of the season was key to even our survival, especially in the hot climate that was the Middle East. And so it was normal in biblical times and according to the Torah that the first month of the year be the first month of spring. That's the time where everything is reborn, that nature, there's a rebirth in nature. And so this is the time when the year starts. It makes complete sense if you live in that kind of consciousness. And Passover comes right in the middle of the month of Nisan. Passover is therefore our first step on the year-long spiritual journey that our tradition invites us into. Now, why is Passover the first step? Why is Passover the holiday through which we begin this exploration of our deepest spirituality? There can't be any way to engage in any kind of spiritual journey unless we ourselves have personally come to the realization that our human life, that our life is bigger than, more than what our ego-bound consciousness leads us to believe or understand. And Passover places each and every one of us in the middle of that kind of realization. There has to be more to my life than the constricted and constricting story which I inhabit. There must be more to who I am than what this world is telling me I need to limit myself to be. There must be more to human aspirations than just to be, as in the story of Passover, just to be the best slave that I can be in an alienating, restricting, self-destructive system, civilization. So on the first night and the second night of Passover, we set up a beautiful table. We put the Seder plate in the middle of the table and we prepare it with all the items that need to go in each of the little boxes so we can tell the story. And then we bring out the Haggadah, the storybook for our annual Seder. And just as we begin barely to read the first few paragraphs of the story of the Haggadah herself confronts us with a question. Ma nishtana? Ma nishtana? What has changed? What has shifted? What is different? It comes from the story, actually, in the book of Exodus, the story of the midwives. Because what has shifted for the midwives in the story of the Exodus is the realization that the edict of Pharaoh to murder all the firstborn males of the Israelite nation is so evil that the veil of acceptance of one's enslavement is suddenly lifted from their eyes, and they, the midwife, stood in rebellion to Pharaoh, stood up to Pharaoh, took a stand against Pharaoh's edict, and refused to perform what Pharaoh had enslaved them to do. One of the first documented acts of rebellion, of civil disobedience from the women of the Israelite people in the story of the Exodus. And that veil, this lifting of the veil from our eyes, is revealing to us that we do not have to accept reality as it is presented to us. And that is what that question at the very beginning of the Haggadah, Ma nishtana? What has shifted? Is there to bring us to. But the Haggadah doesn't stop there. You turn a page or two, and then there is this affirmation that confronts us, that stares us in the face, and says, Avadim ha'inu. Avadim ha'inu. We make it into a cute song. But this is one of the most powerful affirmation in the entire Haggadah. Avadim ha'inu, we were slaves. In our community's Haggadah, there's a quote from Harriet Tubman, and I'm not going to tell it correctly, but the essence is that she's saying, I could have freed hundreds more if I had been able to convince them that they were slaves. And so the Haggadah is staring us in the face and calling out to us, Avadim ha'inu, we were slaves. We are stuck, you and me are stuck in a nightmare of the story of a civilization that is running towards its own self-destruction. We are stuck in our own life. We ourselves are stuck in our own Egypt, stuck in our own Mitzrayim. In Hebrew, Mitzrayim means narrow place, narrow consciousness. And we are stuck, each and every one of us, in this narrow consciousness that forces us to accept this reality as unchangeable, as true, as real. And because it is causing us to look at our life, at our reality from that perspective and know, Avadim ha'inu, that we can start the process of waking up, of liberating ourselves from that place of constriction, that place of stuckness, that bad dream, that nightmare that we live day in and day out in our personal lives, in our communal lives, in our global life, in our national life, however you want to look at it. The story, there is a story that I love that speaks of that. See, we're going to borrow from different traditions because the stories is what matters and what they are there to teach us, to hint at. Avadim ha'inu connects me personally, but I've been known to be weird, connects me personally to the story that Plato tells called the myth of the cave. In the myth of the cave, there's a bunch of human beings that are tied down to the floor of a cave. And their backs are to the entrance of the cave. And they're chained. And they can only see the back of the cave. And what they see, because of the light that is coming from behind them, are shadows reflected on the wall of the cave in front of them. Moving shadows. And because they can't move, and they can only stare at the shadows, they end up believing that what they're looking at is the totality of reality. That those shadows moving on the wall of the cave is in fact the totality of life, of reality, of a universe to which they belong. Looking at shadows, looking at illusions, and believing they are reality. And in the story, one of the human beings that is chained to the floor of the cave is able suddenly to twist, to switch, to move so that he or she, doesn't matter, is able to turn enough that they can glimpse that there is a light coming from behind, and suddenly in doing that slight little move, the light that they see starts to illuminate the other walls in the cave, and they realize, Avadim ha'inu, we were slaves, we are in the cave. We didn't even know we were in the cave. We had no way to know where we were and what we were going through. And ultimately, as the story continues, ultimately that ability to switch, to turn, and to discover the light that is shining from behind them somehow allows that one person to unchain him or herself, stand up and walk out of the cave and into the light of being that they have always been. Plato was a deep mystic. He was a Kabbalist. Plato understood the reality of our everyday life. That we take the shadows of this world as truth. And we don't know that all of those are just the reflection of the one light on the walls of consciousness. Plato was talking about Passover. Plato was talking about Avadim Ha'inu. We are slaves. We are chained to the floor of this cave. Free yourselves. Not only that, but Plato is telling us there is no gate. The cave is wide open. See, we have a tendency to believe ourselves to be stuck as in a prison, and we're completely enclosed, that there is no way out of the reality in which we are living. And we imagine a door. We imagine the bars. But Plato is saying, as our mystics have said all the time, there is no door. They are pointing to the exit, which is wide open. We are the ones imagining the door and therefore keeping ourselves from leaving, from discovering the truth of our reality, of our life, the truth of our very being that is not contained, that is not only this egocentric story in which we are living. It was a joke. There was a joke that I remember learning. It was in French. We'll see if it translates in English. That points to the story the same way. The joke is that there's two crazy guys. They're crazy, and they've been put in a house to help them. And they're crazy, but they're in this institution. They're kept in this institution. And they became best buddies eventually. And at some point, one of them says, enough of this, we have to escape, we have to escape. And he tells the second one, he says, here's what you're going to do. We're going to make a plan to escape. You're going to go out, and you're going to tell me if the wall that contains us is really high. What we'll do is we'll dig underneath a tunnel and we'll escape. But if you go and you come back and you tell me that the wall is somewhat low, then we'll figure out a way to climb over the wall and we'll escape. So I guess, okay, right? That sounds easy enough. So the second guy goes out to check out the institution and the walls in which they were kept. And he comes back and says, we can't escape. There's no way we can't escape. And the other guy just look at him in despair. Why? There is no wall. So do not build walls when there are no walls. Do not create in your life the walls that are keeping you from engaging in this liberating spiritual journey that you are invited into tonight. Do not manufacture fake walls that are keeping you from uncovering the full light, yearning to be discovered, yearning to be manifested in your life and in your world. Let's stop pretending that we have to play by the rules of the prison. Let's stop wishing each other to be the most successful prisoners. And let's begin together a journey through the Jewish year of liberation, a journey of freedom. To find at the end of the journey our true self and to live a true life. And the cycle begins tonight. L'Shana Tova.